The last goodbye when the galaxy's greatest problem solvers left without a word, the universe changed forever. Nobody realized what they'd lost until it was too late. Ambassador Ethan Shaw stood in his office. The stars of the councils, Capital Station twinkling through the glass like silent witnesses. For 5 years, this view had been his whole world. Now, it would belong to someone else. He'd pick up a photo of his wife and son back on Earth, a memory that felt almost like a dream. He had missed so much in the name of hope, birthdays, school, plays, family dinners, all for the chance that humanity might find its true place among the stars. The door chimed. Mir Janssen, his assistant, entered quietly, clutching a data slate. She looked exhausted, her brown eyes shadowed. The exit paperwork is ready, Ambassador, she said softly. Are you sure about this? Ethan managed a tired smile as he took the pad. He signed his name, slow and deliberate. The document was short and to the point. Earth was withdrawing. From the Galactic Council. No complaints, no threats, just a formal goodbye. I'm sure, Mira. We gave them 30 years. We tried every way we knew, but they don't want us as equals. Myra nodded, but her hands trembled. She had spent a decade on this station, believing they could change the galaxy for the better. Down below, in the council chamber, the daily chaos had already begun. Through the internal cameras, Ethan watched as counselors from the Zenturi and the Hegemony barked over mining rights, their voices echoing off polished marble. The debate had gone nowhere for years, always circling the same selfish points. Ethan's come chimed again. On the screen, President Amaya Collins appeared from her office in Geneva. She was flanked by her security chief, face set in grim determination. Is everything ready, Ethan? Yes, Madam President. Withdrawal is signed. The last shuttle leaves in 3 hours. She hesitated. You believed in this more than anyone. But we're done asking for permission to exist. I still believe in cooperation, but both sides have to want it. The call ended. Ethan started to pack a few mementos, an old chess set from his son, a bundle of letters from his wife. The office felt strangely empty, as if history itself were watching him go. Mira stayed busy, organizing computer files and sorting through centuries of reports. Should I delete the mediation records? She asked. Leave them, Ethan said. Maybe someday someone will use them. In the council chamber, the arguments grew louder. The human section sat silent and empty, a gap in the great circle. A few counselors noticed, glancing at the unused seats, but most were too busy fighting for their own interests. Security Chief Dorenzek walked past, pausing at the human offices. He had always respected the humans. They worked harder, volunteered for danger, and kept a level head in crisis. He wondered vaguely where they had gone. On the main shuttle deck, Captain Layla Torres stood waiting by the airlock of the Odyssey, Earth's last diplomatic transport. Her crew wore crisp blue uniforms, but their faces were set and somber. She greeted Ethan and Myra with a nod. Ready to head home, Ambassador? Ethan looked back at the station one last time. Ready. The airlock closed, and with a soft hiss, the Odyssey pulled away. Behind them, the council's routine arguments continued, oblivious. Nobody noticed humanity was gone. The absence felt in the council station. The new day began just like any other, but things were not the same. Trade Minister Sereth of the Hegemony was in the middle of a heated debate with Tech Lord Rin from Simic. Their words grew sharper, their tempers shorter. The humans had always found a way to build bridges between their arguments, but today every suggestion fell flat. There was nobody to play the middle ground. As hours stretched into days, old disputes came roaring back. Simple compromises became impossible. The Zenturi wanted more security in the asteroid belts. The Simics demanded fair technology access. The Hegemony blocked shipments in protest. Every meeting ended in gridlock. For the first time, the Council's business slowed to a crawl. On the Council's industrial moon, young engineer Zero was in trouble. The processing plants, built by a dozen species, upgraded 100 times, were starting to fail. Zarl tried to follow the human manuals left behind, but there were too many variables. The cooling system, a patchwork of technologies, was going haywire. He called the council engineering office, but the advice was useless. Reset everything, the hegemony engineer said. Replace all the pumps, the Zenturi advised. None of it worked. Zarl sent a desperate message to the old human consultant, Kate Williams, but received only an automated reply, no longer available for council assignments. Meanwhile, piracy began to spike in the outer sectors. Doranzek reviewed report after report. Trade ships were hit and robbed, convoys scattered. Before, humans had always predicted criminal tactics, closing loopholes before they were exploited. Now, every security response came too late. The council's patrols were slow, rigid, easy to outmaneuver. The pirates grew bolder each week. On board the Odyssey, Myra and Layla sat quietly as Earth's blue-green orb grew larger in the viewport. Layla had once been proud to wear the council's badge, to fly aid missions to troubled worlds, to see hope in every handshake. But those days were over. She opened a message from her old friend, Turn, a Zeralan pilot. Why did you leave? It asked simply. Myra glanced at her own com, where a series of unanswered messages from alien friends flickered in the inbox. She didn't know what to say. On Earth, Ethan stepped out of the shuttle and into his family's arms. He felt both relief and an unshakable sadness. The news showed human colonies thriving on distant worlds, technology advancing without counsel. Oversight. There was pride, but also a sense of loss for the galaxy, for those left behind. Back on the council station, in the empty chamber, Supreme Counselor Lyra Sovan finally noticed the quiet. Where are the humans? She asked. No one had an answer. Cracks in the foundation. The first real crisis came when the trade lanes collapsed. Resource shortages swept across the council's core worlds. Prices soared, black markets boomed, and minor border skirmishes erupted between the Zenturi and the hegemony. The council's dispute resolution protocols, crafted by humans years before, fell apart without their creators. Meetings dragged on for hours, with nobody able to mediate. On the outer rim, a new problem spread disease. A strange virus was infecting both Zenturi and Zeralan settlers on a mining colony. The council's medical teams were stumped. They tried standard protocols, but the infection kept mutating, jumping between species. In desperation, they searched for the one doctor who had solved similar outbreaks before, Dr. Yusuf Malik, a human immunologist. But Dr. Malik was now running a small clinic on Mars focused on helping Earth's independent colonies. He declined the council's plea for help, too busy keeping his own people safe. Back in the council's heart, arguments reached a boiling point. In one session, Tech Lord Rin slammed his metal fist on the table. We need mediation, he shouted. We always had human mediators. Where are they? Supreme Counselor Sovan sighed. They left. We never valued them. Now we see what they really brought to this table. In the security wing, Dora and Zek watched as piracy grew even more organized. The raiders began using tactics humans had once. Taught to the Council's security forces, hit-and-run ambushes, fake distress signals, carefully timed strikes. The Council's fleets were hopelessly reactive. On Earth, Ethan Shaw found himself being interviewed for a new position, head of a diplomatic advisory group. The interviewer asked, "Would you consider working with the Council again?" Ethan shook his head. We offered everything. They wouldn't listen. On the Council station, Zarul tried to repair the main energy converter, but the patchwork tech refused to cooperate. We need a human engineer, he whispered. Nobody answered. Consequences unfold weeks stretched into months, and the cracks became chasms. Without human ingenuity, the Council's grandest projects stalled. Entire space stations sat unfinished. Trade fleets idled as disputes blocked every route. Civilian protests erupted on multiple worlds. For the first time in generations, hunger returned to the core. Piracy was now an epidemic. Raiding ships struck at will, sometimes stealing entire shipments of food and medical supplies. Council patrols were slow and predictable, following tactics. developed by humans, now exploited by those same humans' absence. On the industrial moon, Zero finally gave up. The cooling system failed completely, and toxic fumes filled the refinery. Dozens of workers were evacuated. Zaro submitted his resignation. "We need a new way of thinking," he wrote. "We need what the humans had." In council medical labs, the plague on the rim mutated again. The medical committee begged for help, but nobody understood the cross-species interactions. Dr. Malik's reports on Mars showed a cure had been found for humans. The council's transmissions requesting his assistance went unanswered. Supreme. Councillor Sauvan called an emergency session. "We must admit it, we depended on the humans for everything that made this council work. Their absence is tearing us apart." Some councillors bristled. Others hung their heads. "Should we reach out to Earth? Ask them to return? What if they refuse?" Another replied. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador Ethan Shaw watched his son play in a garden under the pale light of distant stars. News from the galaxy reached Earth's networks. Council trade in chaos. Pirate attacks rising. A plague sweeping outer worlds. He wondered if the galaxy would learn before it was too late. A galaxy changed. The council faced its greatest reckoning. The chamber, once bustling with diverse voices, now echoed with arguments and blame. Supreme Councillor Sauvan stared at the empty human seats, her voice soft but steady. "We must change or we will fall apart." An envoy was sent to Earth, a message of humility and hope, asking for new talks, a fresh start. Weeks passed with no reply. On Earth, President Amaya Collins held the council's plea, knowing her people deserved better treatment than before. Across the galaxy, human colonies flourished, new arts. New alliances formed on their own terms. The news spread humans had solved the outer rim plague on their own, rebuilt failing colonies, and even launched new exploration missions. Their resilience, creativity, and compassion were now focused on building a future that didn't depend on old grudges or permissions. Back on the council station, Zaro and Doran met in the empty human office, surrounded by unused records and old data files. They realized, finally, that it wasn't just Earth's technology the council had lost. It was the human ability to imagine new solutions, to see possibility in disaster, and to build bridges where none seemed possible. The galaxy understood, too. Late that silence can speak louder than war. Without words or weapons, humanity's absence had changed everything. Ethan Shaw, watching from Earth, felt a strange peace. Sometimes the greatest lesson is not in fighting or saying goodbye, but in walking away and letting the world discover what you truly meant. End.